Alright, welcome back to the video of the Space Shooter tutorial in Unity C#. Today we will be making the movement. Alright, we're going to go create a new C# script and we're going to name it player movement. Player controller is already a Unity component, so we can't name it that. We're just going to select our player and drag the script under it. We're also going to add a component, and it's going to be called the rigid body. We're going to turn off use gravity, and we're also going to add another component, and this one would be called a mesh collider. Okay. A mesh collider is basically just a collider with a mesh. So instead of having a cube, a capsule, a sphere, etc., we'll have a mesh instead. So we're going to head over to Space Shooter Assets, head over to Models, and we're going to go find our player ship. We're going to go click on the drop down, and we have its mesh right here, vehicle underscore player ship with a little grid icon. We're just going to drag that under mesh. So it doesn't look like anything happened, but I assure you, we just have to do a couple more things. We're going to go click on convex, and now we can see that it has like a little outline, a green outline. Just disable the mesh renderer on the player ship. And now we can see the mesh collider we've just created. Now we're going to do a couple more things. We're going to inflate mesh, and we're going to enable is trigger. Okay, let's just re-enable the mesh renderer. Now we can see. Here we go. Alright, there we go. We have our ship with its rigid body and its mesh collider. Now, we're going to go open up the script and start scripting. Alright, first thing we're going to do is delete using system.collections.generic. We don't need that. And we're going to delete method start and method update. Alright, now first we're going to want to make a few variables, and they're going to be of type float. So we're going to make two variables, float. This one's going to be called move horizontal. We're just going to end that off. We're going to make another float. It's going to be move vertical. Alright, now we're going to want to make a new method. And it's going to be called fixed update, uppercase F and uppercase U. Now this is critical that you make sure you spell it exactly how it's spelled on screen, or else it won't work. We'll make a normal method, but we want to use one of Unity's methods. Method update updates every frame, but fixed update also calculates the time between the last frame. Fixed update is usually used for movement. Alright, inside of method fixed update, we're going to want to type in, we're going to want to assign move horizontal is equal to input dot get axis open parentheses and open string horizontal, close string and close parentheses. Same thing for move vertical, except it's for the get axis vertical. Alright, so now we just have two float variables that are just being assigned to those inputs every single frame and the time in between the frames. So that doesn't really do much. So let's make a new method called apply movement. And we're just going to, inside fixed update, we're just going to call it apply movement. Okay. Now what do we want to do inside of our apply movement? Well, we want to set the velocity of the ship to whatever the move horizontal and move vertical is. However, we're not going to use transform for this. Instead, we're going to use the rigid body to control our movement. However, we need a reference to our rigid body. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another variable. It's going to be a private variable. It's going to be called RB. It's going to be of type rigid body. rigid body like that, and it's going to be called RB. Now we're going to put in function start again, or void start. And inside void start, we're just going to set RB is equal to get component rigid body. Close the alligators and open close parentheses, as it is a function. What this is going to do is, since the script is attached to the player, it's going to go to the player and find the component named rigid body, and it's going to assign the variable to the rigid body. Alright, so now we're going to want to change the velocity of our rigid body component whenever every single frame. And we're going to assign it to the move horizontal and the move vertical floats. However, let's go to the documentation so we can see how the rigid body velocity function works. Alright, so as we see, we're in the documentation here. We have the rigid body velocity. This is not a method. Instead, it's a variable, and it's a type vector3 variable. So really, all it is just, that's really all the rigid body velocity is. It's just a vector3 variable. However, we want to change that every single time apply movement is called. So we're going to change the value of that variable. So first, we're going to want to make a new vector3 ourselves, and we're just going to name it new velocity. And we're going to assign it to a new vector3, which we're creating right here. Vector3. And a vector3 takes in 3 units, an x, a y, and a z. Since we're not going to be using the y-axis, because we don't want to be going up and down, so we just want to use the x and z axis. So we're going to want to set the x to move horizontal, the y to 0f, and the z to move vertical. And we're just going to put a semicolon there. Alright, so we have that one done. And now we're going to set the velocity to the rigid body. So now we're going to say RB.velocity is equal to new velocity. Alright, now let's go see what happens. Alright, so it looks like our ship is moving very slowly. So we're definitely going to want to add a variable that increases our speed. So let's go make a public float, or a public int actually. Public integer is going to be named speed. And by default, we're going to set this to 5, I guess. Now when we set the rigid body's velocity, we're going to want to set it to new velocity multiplied by speed. Alright, now we can change it from the inspector. Let's just leave that at 5 and see what happens. Perfect. Now our movement works.